The stars above Glax 5 shimmered faintly, their light barely cutting through the dense atmosphere of the jungle-covered planet. For centuries, the Galactic Union had scouted the galaxy for habitable worlds rich in resources, but few had proven as tantalizing and as dangerous as Glax 5. The reports painted a picture of paradise: vast oceans, fertile land, and an ecosystem brimming with biodiversity. Yet, that same ecosystem was also the reason why every exploratory mission to the planet had ended in disaster. The apex predators of Glax 5, the Dracons, had made survival nearly impossible for any who dared venture onto their turf. The latest attempt to tame Glax 5 had brought together some of the Union's finest scientific minds. The alien expedition team, led by the highly regarded Sira, a ton of the Vicorian race, had arrived with advanced technology designed to secure a base of operations. Their initial confidence had quickly turned into desperation. The Dracons were unlike anything they had encountered before. Towering beasts with sinewy muscles and scales that reflected the jungle's dappled light, they stalked their prey with terrifying intelligence. Worse yet, their pack instincts made them almost impossible to predict. Defense grids malfunctioned, automated turrets failed to keep up, and each attack seemed to expose new vulnerabilities in the team's carefully laid plans. By the second week, the camp was a battlefield. Shimmering energy shields flickered under constant assault, the perimeter littered with the twisted remains of broken drones. Supplies were dwindling, and morale among the team had plummeted. Arguments broke out over their next steps. Should they retreat, risking their reputations, or call in reinforcements and double down on their efforts? Sira, a ton, usually the epitome of composure, found herself struggling to maintain order among the diverse group of alien specialists. Another attack last night, Zira muttered to herself as she reviewed the damage reports in her command tent. The once pristine fabric walls of the structure were now smudged with dirt and burn marks. Third one this week. If we don't find a solution soon, we'll have to abandon the mission. Her thoughts were interrupted by a chime from her communicator. The holographic image of General Rakor, a senior Galactic Union officer, flickered to life before her. The general's reptilian features were stern, his golden eyes narrowing as he addressed her. "Commander Atun, I have reviewed your situation," he began without preamble. "It seems clear that your current strategies are insufficient. The Union has decided to send additional support." Sierra's shoulders sagged in relief. "Reinforcements would be most welcome, General. When can we expect them?" Rakor's lip curled slightly, a gesture Sierra recognized as disdain. Not reinforcements. A specialist. A human. Sierra blinked in surprise. "A human? With all due respect, General, what expertise could a Deathworlder possibly bring to this mission? Our equipment has failed repeatedly," Rakor interrupted. "Humans have a unique perspective on survival. Their adaptability may prove valuable where your technology has not." Sierra wanted to protest, but she knew it would be futile. Once the Union made a decision, it rarely reversed course. "Understood, General. I will. Prepare the team for her arrival. She will arrive tomorrow. Make use of her, a ton. You are out of options." The transmission ended, leaving Zira staring at the empty space where the hologram had been. A human. Of all the species in the Union, humans were among the most controversial. Hailing from a so-called death world, they were regarded as both fascinating and reckless. Their ability to endure and adapt to harsh environments was legendary, but so were their unpredictable methods. Sierra had never worked with one before, and she wasn't sure how her team would react. The following morning, a sleek shuttle descended into the jungle clearing that served as the team's landing zone. The vessel's engines kicked up a storm of dust and leaves, sending nearby scientists scrambling for cover. As the landing ramp lowered, a figure stepped out, clad in lightweight survival gear that looked almost primitive compared to the sleek uniforms of the alien crew. "Dr. Emily Carter, reporting for duty," the human said, her voice calm but firm. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and surveyed the scene with sharp, calculating eyes. Sierra approached, flanked by two of her subordinates, a stoic Tralaxian named Varn and a skittish Zithar named Milo. "Dr. Carter," Sierra said, her tone neutral. "I am Commander Sierra Atun. Welcome to Glax 5, though I must admit, I am uncertain what assistance you can provide." Emily offered a polite smile. "Commander, I appreciate your honesty. I'm here because your current methods aren't working. I specialize in studying and managing hostile ecosystems. Sometimes, it's not about overpowering the environment but understanding it." Milo, unable to contain his skepticism, blurted out, "What could you possibly understand about the Dracons? They're relentless. Your species doesn't even have scales." Emily raised an eyebrow but remained composed. "True, but my species has faced predators just as relentless on Earth. We survived by learning their patterns and using our environment to our advantage. That's what I intend to do here." Sierra nodded reluctantly. "Very well, Dr. Carter. The camp is at your disposal, but understand this failure is not an option. We cannot afford more losses." As Emily began unpacking her gear, she noticed the alien team watching her with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. She didn't blame them; she was an outsider in their world, and her methods were unorthodox by their standards. But she had a job to do, and she intended to prove that sometimes the simplest solutions could achieve the most extraordinary results. Her first task was to assess the Dracons. Unlike the alien scientists, who had relied on automated drones and distant observation, Emily insisted on seeing the predators up close. Equipped with a compact scanner and a notebook and object that drew bemused stares from the aliens, she ventured beyond the camp's perimeter, accompanied by a reluctant Varn and a terrified Milo. The jungle was alive with sounds: the rustle of leaves, the chirping of alien insects, and the occasional guttural roar of a Dracon. Emily moved carefully, her eyes scanning for tracks, scat, and other signs of the predators. Varn, watching her, couldn't help but ask, "What do you hope to find?" "We already know they're aggressive and territorial." "I'm looking for patterns," Emily replied without breaking stride. "No creature is aggressive all the time. There's always a reason: hunger, fear, defense. If we understand their motivations, we can predict their behavior." Hours passed as Emily made notes and recorded observations. She noticed how the Dracons marked their territory with clawed trees, and how they avoided certain areas where the jungle foliage was unusually dense. By the time the trio returned to camp, Emily had a growing hypothesis about the predators' behavior. But she knew proving it would be another challenge entirely. The humid air of Glax 5 pressed against Emily's skin like a heavy blanket as she stepped out of the camp's protective perimeter for the second time. Behind her, Varn and Milo reluctantly followed, their unease palpable. The forest around them was alive with sound, a cacophony of alien lifeforms creating an unsettling symphony of chirps, growls, and rustling leaves. Emily didn't seem bothered. If anything, she looked intrigued, her sharp eyes darting between the dense foliage as she scribbled notes into her small, worn notebook. "What exactly are we doing out here again?" Milo asked, his voice trembling as he clutched a small energy blaster. "We already know the Dracons are dangerous. Isn't that enough?" Emily glanced over her shoulder with a calm smile. "Dangerous, yes, but understanding how they're dangerous is the key. Creatures like the Dracons don't act without reason. Every predator has patterns, habits, motivations, and vulnerabilities. If we can uncover theirs, we can figure out how to coexist." Varn, ever the stoic, didn't comment, but his watchful gaze suggested he was at least partially convinced. As a Tralaxian, his species had evolved on a high-gravity world teeming with massive, aggressive herbivores, making him no stranger to survival in hostile environments. However, even he had never encountered anything like the Dracons, whose cunning and ferocity bordered on terrifying. The group moved deeper into the jungle, Emily leading with a confident stride despite the oppressive atmosphere. She paused occasionally, kneeling to examine a claw mark on a tree or to collect samples of disturbed soil. Varn stood guard while Milo fidgeted nervously, his large, insectoid eyes darting in every direction. "What are you looking for now?" Varn asked gruffly as Emily crouched near a cluster of strange, luminous plants, signs of territorial behavior. Emily explained, brushing her fingers lightly over the plants without disturbing them. "These claw marks here, see how they're clustered around this patch of vegetation. The Dracons might be marking resources they consider valuable. Food, perhaps. Or shelter," Milo scoffed. "And how does that help us? We already know they attack anything that moves." Emily stood and turned to face him, her expression patient but firm. "Because if we understand what they're protecting, we can avoid provoking them. Or better yet, use it to our advantage." Her words hung in the air as the group continued their exploration. Emily's focus was unshakable, and her methodical approach contrasted sharply with the high-tech reliance of the alien team. The scanners and drones they had deployed earlier had captured an overwhelming amount of data, but none of it had led to actionable insights. Emily, on the other hand, trusted her instincts and experience, treating the jungle like a living puzzle. After hours of trekking, they came across a small clearing. The area was littered with bones, large, cracked fragments that gleamed white under the faint light filtering through the canopy. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, and Milo recoiled in horror. "This is a feeding ground," Emily said softly, stepping forward to examine the scene. "Look at the way the bones are arranged. The Dracons are dragging their prey here to eat." Varn crouched beside her, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. "But why here? There's nothing special about this spot." Emily pointed to the ground, where faint trails of disturbed dirt formed a pattern. "Look closer. This clearing is at the intersection of multiple game trails. The Dracons are ambush predators. They position themselves here because it maximizes their chances of intercepting prey." The realization was unsettling. The predators weren't just savage, they were strategic. Milo's mandibles clicked nervously. "So they're smarter than we thought. That's just great." "They're smart." "Yes," Emily agreed. "But that also means they're predictable. If we can identify their ambush zones, we can map out safe routes through the jungle." The group spent the next few hours mapping the area, marking the trails and noting the placement of claw marks and other signs of Dracon activity. Emily's notebook filled with sketches and observations, each one bringing her closer to understanding the predator's behavior. As the sun began to set, painting the jungle in hues of gold and crimson, the team made their way back to the camp. The walk was tense, the weight of their discoveries hanging heavily over them. Emily remained alert, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of a machete she carried for emergencies. Varn followed close behind, his sharp senses tuned to every sound, while Milo brought up the rear, muttering anxiously to himself. Just as they neared the perimeter of the camp, a low, guttural growl froze them in their tracks. Emily raised a hand, signaling for silence. The growl came again, closer this time, and the underbrush rustled as something massive moved toward them. "Dracon," Varn hissed, his hand going to his weapon. Emily shook her head. "No sudden movements. Let me handle this." Before anyone could protest, she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the shadows. The growling grew louder, and a moment later, a Dracon emerged from the foliage. Its scales gleamed like polished obsidian, and its eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light. It was smaller than she had expected, likely a juvenile, but no less dangerous. The creature locked eyes with Emily, its muscles tensing as it prepared to pounce. She stood her ground, her posture calm but confident. Slowly, she reached into her pack and pulled out a small device, a sound emitter she had modified earlier. She activated it, and a low-frequency hum filled the air. The Dracon froze, its head tilting in confusion. The sound seemed to disorient it, causing it to back away slowly. Emily didn't move until the creature disappeared back into the jungle, its growls fading into the distance. What just happened?" Milo stammered, his wide eyes darting between Emily and the spot where the predator had stood. "I noticed earlier that their territorial markings avoid areas with certain vibrations," Emily explained, deactivating the emitter. "I I replicated that frequency. It's not a perfect solution, but it bought us time. Varn nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his features. Impressive. But we can't rely on that alone. I know, Emily replied. But it's a start. The more we learn, the better our chances. Back at the camp, the team reviewed their findings. The alien scientists were initially skeptical of Emily's methods, but the evidence she presented was undeniable. The maps she had created, and the patterns she had identified offered a new perspective on the Dracons, one that could potentially turn the tide of their mission. As the others debated their next steps, Emily sat quietly at the edge of the group, her mind already racing with new ideas. The jungle still held many secrets, but she was determined to uncover them. For the first time since arriving on Glax 5, she felt a glimmer of hope. If they could continue to outthink the predators, survival might just be within reach. The tension in the camp was palpable. Days had passed since Emily's initial fieldwork, and while her observations had sparked hope, the team was still far from feeling secure. The Dracons continued their nocturnal assaults, testing the camp's defenses and exploiting every weakness. Energy barriers flickered ominously under the weight of the relentless attacks, and supplies dwindled as drones and turrets were destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Emily sat at a crude workstation she had set up in the corner of the main research tent. Her notebook lay open beside a cluster of alien devices she had modified with salvaged parts. Each page was filled with intricate sketches of the Dracons' behavior patterns, territorial zones, and potential vulnerabilities. She worked with quiet determination, her fingers deftly adjusting a small emitter she'd been designing since her first encounter with the predators. Sierra entered the tent, her sharp, commanding presence immediately filling the space. "Dr. Carter," she said, her voice clipped. "The team is growing impatient. They want results. You've had days to observe the Dracons. What have you discovered?" Emily looked up, meeting Sierra's intense gaze without flinching. "I've identified several key weaknesses in their behavior. The Dracons are intelligent, but their intelligence is instinct-driven. They rely heavily on their senses sight, smell, and hearing. If we can exploit those, we can create zones they perceive as uninhabitable." Sierra folded her arms, her skepticism evident. "And how do you propose we do that?" Emily picked up the device she'd been working on, a compact, palm-sized emitter with a glowing core. This is a prototype of a multi-frequency sound generator. It emits a combination of low-frequency vibrations and ultrasonic pulses. Based on my observations, these frequencies disorient the Dracons and trigger a flight response. The commander arched an eyebrow. "You're saying you can scare them away with sound?" Emily nodded. "Not just scare them, redirect them. By placing these emitters strategically around the camp, we can create a perimeter that they'll instinctively avoid. It's a form of non-lethal deterrence that doesn't rely on constant energy input like your barriers." Sierra considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. "If this works, it could buy us the time we need to complete our mission. When can you deploy it?" "I'll need help setting up the emitters and calibrating them to the terrain," Emily replied. "But I can have the first test ready by nightfall." The hours leading up to the test were a flurry of activity. Emily worked tirelessly alongside Varn and a few other volunteers to deploy the emitters around the camp. Each device was placed at a carefully calculated distance, ensuring optimal coverage without overlap. The alien scientists watched with a mix of curiosity and doubt, their advanced technological sensibilities struggling to reconcile with Emily's seemingly simplistic solution. As night fell, the jungle came alive with its usual chorus of sounds. The team gathered in the control tent, their eyes fixed on the monitors displaying live feeds from the perimeter cameras. The Dracons' roars echoed in the distance, signaling the start of another hunt. Emily stood at the console, her finger hovering over the activation button. Once the emitters are online, the perimeter should become an uninviting zone for the Dracons. It may not stop them entirely, but it should disrupt their approach. Sierra nodded. "Do it." Emily pressed the button, and the emitters hummed to life. On the screens, faint waves of distortion rippled through the air around the camp, invisible to the naked eye but perceptible to the Drakhands. For a few tense moments, nothing happened. Then, the first predator appeared on the feed, its massive frame emerging from the shadows as it approached the perimeter. The Drakhan froze mid-stride, its head tilting as it sensed the disturbance. It growled low, taking a cautious step forward before recoiling as the ultrasonic pulses intensified. The creature snarled, pacing back and forth along the perimeter but never crossing it. Eventually, it retreated into the jungle, its roar fading into the night. A collective sigh of relief swept through the tent. "It's working," Varn said, his usually stoic voice tinged with amazement. Emily allowed herself a small smile. "For now. But we need to monitor their behavior. If they adapt, we'll have to adjust the frequencies." The following nights were a mix of triumph and tension. The emitters proved highly effective, drastically reducing the frequency and intensity of Drakhan attacks. For the first time since the mission began, the team was able to focus on their research without constant interruptions. Spirits lifted as the camp became a haven of relative safety. However, Emily knew better than to grow complacent. Predators like the Drakhans were not easily deterred, and she anticipated they would eventually test the perimeter more aggressively. Her fears were confirmed on the fifth night, when an unusually large Drakhan appeared on the monitors. The creature was different from the others, larger, more muscular, with scars crisscrossing its dark scales. It prowled along the perimeter, its glowing yellow eyes scanning the area with an unsettling intelligence. When it encountered the invisible barrier created by the emitters, it didn't retreat like the others. Instead, it began circling, its growls growing louder with each pass. "What is it doing?" Milo asked, his voice trembling as he clutched his weapon. "It's testing the limits," Emily replied, her tone grim. "This one's a leader. If it finds a weakness, the others will follow." The Drakhan continued its relentless probing, occasionally striking at the ground with its massive claws as if trying to uncover the source of the disturbance. Emily's mind raced as she analyzed its behavior. She realized that the creature wasn't just reacting to the sound, it was searching for the emitters themselves. "It's trying to locate the devices," she said, turning to Sira. "We need to create a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" Sira asked. Emily grabbed a spare emitter from the table and adjusted its settings. "Something loud and mobile. If we can draw it away from the perimeter, we can reconfigure the defenses before it returns." Varn stepped forward. "I'll do it." "Give me the device." Emily hesitated, knowing the risk involved. "Are you sure?" "This thing won't back down easily." Varn's expression was resolute. "I'm sure." With the emitter in hand, Varn exited the tent and activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a series of pulsing vibrations. The Drakhan immediately reacted, its head snapping toward the source of the sound. It let out a deafening roar and charged toward Varn, who sprinted into the jungle, leading the predator away from the camp. The minutes that followed were agonizing. Emily and the team worked frantically to recalibrate the emitters, increasing their range and intensity. On the monitors, they watched as Varn lured the Drakhan deeper into the jungle, using the device to keep its attention. Finally, with the adjustments complete, Emily activated the new settings. The jungle fell eerily silent as the emitters emitted a new, more powerful frequency. When Varn returned, breathless but unharmed, he reported that the Drakhan had retreated, its growls fading into the distance. The success of the operation solidified Emily's position within the team. Her ingenuity and determination had not only protected the camp, but also demonstrated the value of human adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds. While the Drakhans remained a constant threat, the balance of power had shifted. For the first time, the team had hoped that their mission could succeed. The dawn over Glax 5 painted the dense jungle in shades of gold and green, a serene facade that belied the tension still simmering in the camp. Though Emily's emitters had proven effective in reducing the attacks, the Drakhan's most recent test of their defenses lingered in everyone's minds. The near-constant fear of another assault had eased, but it was replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. What if the predators adapted again? What if they found a way through the perimeter? Emily stood on the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the jungle as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy. Despite the relative quiet, her mind was far from at rest. Her hands clutched her notebook, now filled with detailed sketches and notes about the Dracons' behavior, territorial patterns, and their response to her methods. It was progress, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were only delaying the inevitable. "Dr. Carter," Sierra's voice called from behind her, breaking her thoughts. Emily turned to find the Vicorian commander standing tall, her posture as rigid and imposing as ever. Yet there was a softness to her tone that Emily hadn't heard before. "The team is ready to present their findings. Your presence is requested." Emily nodded and followed Zyra to the central research tent, where the rest of the team had gathered. Monitors displayed data streams, maps of the jungle, and footage from the previous night's encounters. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of relief and apprehension. Varn stood near one of the consoles, his massive frame commanding attention as he spoke. "Thanks to Dr. Carter's emitters, we've managed to reduce the frequency of attacks by over 70%. The Dracons are avoiding the camp, and our supply lines are operational again." A murmur of approval rippled through the group, but it was Milo who voiced the lingering doubt. "That's all well and good, but we can't rely on this forever. The Dracons are learning. They'll find a way to counter the emitters eventually. Then what?" Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You're right. This isn't a permanent solution. The Dracons are intelligent, and their ability to adapt is one of their greatest strengths. But that also means we can predict their behavior if we understand them fully." Sierra tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing. "What are you proposing, Dr. Carter?" Emily took a deep breath, knowing the weight of what she was about to suggest. "We need to shift our approach. Instead of focusing solely on defense, we need to engage with the Dracons on their terms. Study them not as enemies, but as part of this ecosystem. There's a balance here that we've disrupted by trying to dominate the environment. If we can restore that balance, we might be able to coexist." The room fell silent as the team processed her words. The idea of coexistence with such fearsome predators seemed almost laughable, yet there was a logic to her argument that was difficult to dismiss. Varn broke the silence. "And how do you suggest we do that?" Emily placed her notebook on the table, flipping to a detailed map of the jungle. "We've identified their hunting grounds, territorial markers, and the resources they value most. What we haven't considered is what they fear. Every apex predator has a natural limiter, something they avoid, even if it's not immediately obvious. If we can identify that, we can establish safe zones without relying on constant barriers." Sierra leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "You're suggesting that we mimic the conditions of their natural deterrence? Create an environment that discourages their presence without direct confrontation?" "Exactly," Emily replied. "But it will require further observation and risk. We'll need to venture deeper into their territory to uncover the full picture." The decision to proceed with Emily's plan was not unanimous, but Sierra ultimately gave her approval. Over the next few days, Emily led small teams on expeditions into the heart of Dracon territory. They moved cautiously, using the emitters to maintain a safe distance from the predators while gathering crucial data. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the Dracons' behavior, but it also revealed the delicate balance of the jungle ecosystem. One breakthrough came when Emily observed a rare interaction between a Dracon and a smaller, brightly colored creature she dubbed a flarebird. The bird emitted a high-pitched screech and flared its iridescent feathers whenever a Dracon approached. To Emily's surprise, the predator retreated, seemingly unwilling to engage with the tiny, unassuming creature. Back at camp, she analyzed the footage, noting the specific frequency of the flarebird's call and the patterns of its behavior. "This could be it," she told Sierra during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "The flarebirds are territorial and aggressive, but they pose no actual threat to the Dracons. It's their sound and visual display that keep the predators at bay. Using this insight, Emily developed a new prototype, a combination of sound emitters and holographic projectors designed to replicate the flarebird's deterrent effect. The devices were placed strategically throughout the jungle, creating corridors that redirected the Drakkhans away from the camp and critical areas. The first night of the new system's implementation was tense. The team monitored the perimeter with bated breath, watching as the Drakkhans approached but hesitated upon encountering the holographic flarebirds. The predators prowled the edges of the safe zones, growling in frustration, but ultimately turned back. Over the following weeks, the attacks dwindled to almost nothing. The camp became a place of productivity and discovery, with the team finally able to focus on their research without fear of constant assault. The success of Emily's methods earned her the respect and admiration of even the most skeptical members of the team. But for Emily, the true victory came during a quiet moment alone in the jungle. She stood at the edge of a clearing, watching as a group of Drakkhans moved gracefully through the trees. They paid her no attention, their focus on a distant prey. For the first time, she saw them not as monsters, but as creatures perfectly adapted to their world, creatures that had as much right to exist as anyone else. Syra approached, her usually stern demeanor softened by a rare smile. "You've done something remarkable here, Dr. Carter. Not just for us, but for the Union. This mission will be a turning point in how we approach exploration and coexistence." Emily nodded, her gaze never leaving the predators. "It's not about conquering the unknown. It's about understanding it. That's how we survive, not by fighting, but by finding balance." As the sun set over Glax 5, casting the jungle in hues of orange and purple, Emily felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known in years. The camp was safe, the mission was a success, and the Drakkhans remained an awe-inspiring testament to the resilience of life. In their survival, she saw a reflection of humanity's own journey, a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, understanding and adaptability could lead to harmony.